While cleaning out my mom's house, I found letters from my dad saying I was a mistake, and she'd blackmailed him for years. She lied. My uncles mocked me, and I lost everything, until I mailed those letters to someone who could end her career. I was on my knees, scrubbing the baseboards in my mom's hallway when the box tipped over. Just an old, cracked shoebox wrapped in faded duct tape. I wasn't supposed to find it. It fell behind a stack of photo albums, hitting the floor so hard the lid popped open. Letters spilled everywhere, yellowed, folded, fragile. My mom's name on the envelopes in my dad's handwriting. At first, I smiled. My dad died when I was 15, and I thought maybe I'd found something sweet. Old love letters, maybe. But when I opened the first one, my stomach flipped. It started with, "I wish I'd never let her keep it. I can't believe you'd go through with this. I'm sending the money, but this is the last time." I read that line over and over. Keep it. Send the money. Last time. It took me a minute to realize he was talking about me. I went through them one by one, shaking. Every letter was some version of the same thing. Him begging her to stop asking for money, her apparently threatening to expose him, and him calling me a mistake. There were phrases like, "She doesn't need to know," and "Tell her I left because I was selfish, not because I couldn't handle the guilt." When I got to the last one, it wasn't even written in his usual neat handwriting. It was desperate, angry. He said she'd ruined his life, that she'd used me as a bargaining chip. That phrase burned into my head. I sat there on the hardwood, surrounded by letters that told me my entire childhood was a lie. My mom had spent years telling me he abandoned us. She cried over him in front of me, said he never cared. I hated him for years, and all this time she'd been blackmailing him. When I confronted her, she didn't even deny it. She just looked at me, tired and annoyed, like I'd caught her stealing change from my wallet. Then she said, "I had to blame someone, why not him?" Those words hollowed me out. I left that night. I didn't pack much, just grabbed my keys, my phone, and those letters. My uncles, her brothers, they all knew. One of them called me later, told me not to make a scene. He actually said, "We used to joke that you were her little bargaining chip." I think that was the moment something inside me snapped. I didn't yell, I didn't cry. I just told him, "Thanks for confirming." Then I hung up. For a few weeks, I stayed with a friend and tried to figure out what to do next. Every time I read those letters, I saw more than betrayal, I saw evidence. Proof of everything they'd done to my father. But I wasn't ready to go to the police. Not yet. I wanted it to hurt. I wanted it to mean something. So I took those letters, made copies, and sealed them in an envelope. On the outside, I wrote a name, someone who could ruin her with a single phone call. Then I mailed them. And that's where everything started to fall apart. I grew up believing my dad was the villain of our story. My mom made sure of that. She used to tell me bedtime stories about how he chose another life over us, how he walked away without a backward glance. I remember being 6 years old, sitting on her lap while she cried and told me, "He didn't even want to see you when you were born." That stuck. Every birthday, every Father's Day, that line echoed in my head. I used to imagine him somewhere far away, happy with a new family, pretending I didn't exist. But we weren't rich. Far from it. Mom worked as a dental assistant, barely making enough to cover rent. Still, she always had these sudden bursts of money. One Christmas, she bought me a new bike and a PlayStation out of nowhere. Another time, she cleared her credit cards in one swoop. She always brushed it off, said she'd gotten a bonus or a tax return. I never questioned it. I was a kid. I just thought she was hustling hard for us. Then there were my uncles, her brothers, Dean and Larry. They were always around, loud and joking, but they had this edge when they talked to me. They'd say things like, "You're lucky your mom kept you," or "You cost her a lot, kiddo." I thought they were being cruel for fun. Now I realize they were being literal. Mom hated talking about Dad's side of the family. She burned the few pictures we had of him when I was 10, said she couldn't stand his face anymore. I only had one left, a small one from their wedding. I used to stare at it sometimes, trying to see if I looked like him. After he died, heart attack, out of state, I remember the funeral being strange. Mom cried, but it felt staged. The whole time, she kept glancing at his lawyer, this tall, quiet man in a dark suit. I didn't understand it then, but now I know she was making sure her secret stayed buried. That's probably when it ended, whatever deal they had. He was gone, and so was the money. From that point on, things got tighter. Mom's mood swung hard. Some days she was loving and nostalgic, other days she'd snap at me for breathing too loud. When I hit my 20s, I started asking questions. About him, about their marriage, about why we never had contact with anyone from his family. Every time she'd shut me down. He left us. What else is there to say? But then last month she had knee surgery, and I went to help clean up her house while she recovered. That's when I found the letters. After I read them, everything in my life rearranged itself. My childhood memories turned into something else entirely, like someone had taken a photo I loved and flipped it over to show the mold on the back. And when I mailed those letters, I wasn't thinking straight. I wasn't planning a perfect revenge. I just wanted to make her see herself. The person I sent them to, someone who had every reason to despise her. Someone who had the power to burn everything she'd built down to ash. But I had no idea how fast it would all spiral after that. The letters were gone for about 2 weeks before anything happened. 2 weeks of silence, of waiting for a reaction that didn't come. I started to think maybe I'd made a mistake, that maybe the person I sent them to wouldn't even care. Then one night, I got a call from my Uncle Dean. "Your mom's freaking out," he said. His voice was low, angry. "Someone mailed her boss a bunch of your dad's letters. You wouldn't know anything about that, would you?" I said nothing. He took my silence as a yes. "You stupid little," he started, but I hung up. That was how I found out who I'd actually mailed them to. I thought I'd sent them to an old family friend, someone from my dad's side. Turns out, Mom still worked at the same dental office, and her boss was the one person she couldn't afford to piss off, because she'd been stealing from him for years. I didn't know that part yet, but I was about to. 2 days later, I got a message from an unknown number. "We need to talk. I'm not mad. I think you just changed everything." It was signed with a name, Dr. Simons, her boss. When we met at a coffee shop, he looked like someone who hadn't slept in days. He told me he'd received an unmarked envelope full of photocopied letters, all dated between 1995 and 2004. "Your father wrote these?" he asked. I nodded. Then he told me something that made my chest tighten. "She used to come into my office crying about how hard it was to raise you alone," he said. "I gave her extra hours, loans, even covered her rent once or twice." He paused. "But then, a few years ago, I caught her changing patient billing records. I didn't fire her because she said she'd pay me back soon. Now I see where that money came from." That's when I realized I hadn't just exposed her lie about my dad. I'd opened up a trail of her crimes. Dr. Simons told me he was filing a report. "I can't protect her anymore," he said. "You did the right thing." But that night, my mom called me. Her voice was shaking, not from fear but from rage. "You think you're righteous," she hissed. "You think your father was some kind of hero. You don't know anything." Then she said something that still echoes in my head. "He didn't send that money because he pitied you. He sent it because he was afraid." Before I could ask what she meant, she hung up. The next morning, I woke up to 30 missed calls. My mom had disappeared. Her car was gone. My uncles were blowing up my phone, calling me every name in the book. And then, a week later, a letter showed up in my mailbox. No return address. Just one line inside, written in her handwriting. "You never should have opened that box." That's when I knew this wasn't just about old secrets anymore. Something else, something darker, was buried under all of it, and I was about to dig it up. A week after that letter, I got a call from a lawyer. Not my dad's, not Dr. Simons. This one was from my father's estate. Apparently, someone had come forward trying to contest a portion of my dad's life insurance payout. That shouldn't have been possible. The money was distributed years ago. But the lawyer told me, "It's your mother. She's claiming new evidence about your father's will." My mom, who was supposedly broke, who had vanished. When I met with the lawyer in Denver, he handed me a file. Inside were photocopies of legal papers, forged signatures, and an old letter my dad had written that I'd never seen before. It wasn't like the others. This one wasn't angry, it was terrified. In it, he said, "She knows. She said she'll tell the girl if I stop paying. She said she'll tell her everything and it will destroy her. I don't know what's true anymore. I think she wants me gone." And then there was the kicker, an attached note from the coroner's office. My dad's heart attack had been listed as cardiac failure, but now that term was under review, because an anonymous tip had requested a re-examination of the case. When I read that, my stomach dropped. My dad didn't just die far away and alone, there was a chance he didn't die naturally at all. The lawyer said quietly, "Your mother may have been in contact with him before his death." He showed me proof, a phone record, 1 week before Dad's passing. A 32-minute call. I couldn't breathe. I went home that night and dug through the letters again. In one, my father had written, "If you tell her what you did, I'll go to the police. I mean it this time." Tell me what? What did she do? I called my Uncle Dean again, voice shaking. I told him everything about the lawyer, about the letter, about the coroner. There was a long silence on the other end, and then he muttered, "Christ, she said she'd never actually done it." "Done what?" I asked. He didn't answer, he just said, "You need to stop digging. Some things are better left buried." Then he hung up. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat up rereading the letters until I noticed something weird, tiny punctures near the stamps on several of them. Like someone had stuck a pin through the paper before sealing them. I looked closer and realized those weren't punctures. They were needle holes. And suddenly I understood. Those weren't just letters, they were evidence. Something my dad had been trying to preserve without anyone realizing it. Maybe he was documenting her threats. Maybe he was scared for his life, but whatever he'd been afraid of, it found him. Because after those letters stopped, so did he. And if the coroner's office was reopening his case, it meant someone else thought the same thing I did. My mother didn't just ruin him, she might have killed him. And now she was out there, somewhere, watching me. After that revelation, I couldn't think straight. I wasn't even sure what I wanted more: justice, truth, or just to make her feel something. For years, she'd played me like a pawn, and now it looked like she'd killed the man I'd spent half my life hating for no reason. And she'd gotten away with it. Not anymore. I started with the letters. I scanned every single one into encrypted folders and uploaded them to 3 separate cloud drives, each under different names. I backed them up to flash drives I hid in random places, one at a friend's house, one in my glove compartment, one mailed to myself with no return address. Then I called Dr. Simons. He was furious. "Your mom's disappeared. She's probably destroying evidence," he said, but I told him to wait. "I've got something better than the cops," I said. I wasn't bluffing. Through my dad's old lawyer, I tracked down someone who'd worked with my father toward the end, a woman named Lydia Grant. She was listed as a consultant, but when I called, her first words were, "Is this about Laura?" My mother's name. Lydia told me that my dad had come to her for help because he believed someone was intercepting his mail and calls. He'd been documenting everything. She said he'd left behind one last deposit box in a credit union in Boulder, and she still had access because she'd been listed as a witness for a personal matter. When she said she could add me to the authorization list, I drove there that same night. The box was small, cold metal, and inside was a stack of photos, a USB drive, and a sealed envelope labeled for when she finally tells her side. I didn't open it yet. I just stared at it. My dad's handwriting looked steady, deliberate, like he knew someday I'd be the one reading it. Back home, I plugged in the USB. It was a set of scanned documents, journal entries, even audio files, him talking about how she'd been threatening him. But what chilled me most was a note dated 1 week before he died. She said if I tell anyone what she did to that man, she'll use the girl again. I believe her. God help us. That man, I didn't know who he meant. But whatever it was, it had scared him enough to keep paying her for almost 2 decades. That night, I made my plan. I wrote out everything: the timeline, the letters, the lawyer's file, Lydia's info. Then I packaged it all up in a neat folder and sent it to 2 people. Detective Jameson, the one reviewing my father's case. A reporter I found who'd written about local corruption in Denver's legal system. If my mom wanted to hide, fine. I'd let the whole damn world find her for me. But before I sent the second envelope, I made one last call to Uncle Dean. "You said she promised she'd never do it again," I said. "What was it?" he sighed. "You really want to know? I've earned it." He hesitated, then said, "Ask yourself why your dad kept paying her. It wasn't for you. It was to keep someone else buried." Then he hung up again. That's when I realized this wasn't about money anymore. It was about covering something much bigger, something my dad had almost exposed. And now, if my mom was desperate enough to run, she'd be desperate enough to do it again. 2 days after I mailed those packets, Detective Jameson called me. His tone was different this time, sharp, almost wary. "We need to talk," he said. "In person." When I got to the station, he didn't waste time. He slid a thin file across the desk. Inside was a photo of a man. Early 30s, thin, brown hair, nervous eyes. The caption read, Marcus Leary missing since 1998. I need you to look at this carefully, he said. Do you recognize him? At first, I didn't. Then something clicked. I'd seen that face before in one of my mom's old photo albums. She'd told me he was a friend who helped with the move after my dad left. I hadn't thought about him in 20 years. Jameson continued. He worked for your father, accounting department. Went missing the same week your dad first started transferring large sums of money to your mother. My stomach turned. He opened another photo, this one of a car being pulled from a riverbank years ago. They found his vehicle but no body. Your father filed a report, then a week later he retracted it. I whispered, because she made him. Jameson nodded slightly. That's what we're thinking now. According to the detective, Marcus had discovered discrepancies in your dad's company accounts, money being funneled to an unverified personal recipient. He confronted your father, who confronted your mother. Days later, Marcus vanished. The unverified recipient, it was her. She wasn't blackmailing him just for your existence, Jameson said quietly. She was covering up a disappearance. I couldn't breathe. My dad hadn't been scared of her because she'd threatened to tell me I was unwanted. He was scared because she had killed someone, and he knew it. And then, to protect me, or maybe to protect himself, he'd kept paying her to stay quiet. I left the station numb. My whole life had been built on her lie, and underneath that lie was a dead man. That night, I opened the sealed envelope from the deposit box. Inside was a single piece of paper and a USB stick. The note said, if she ever tells her story, play this first. I played the recording. My dad's voice filled the room, tired, trembling, broken. If anyone finds this, I need you to know the truth. She called me that night, said Marcus had come to the house to get his share. Said there was an accident. When I got there, there was blood in the garage. She told me it was self-defense, but I knew. She said if I told the police, she'd take you and disappear. So I paid. I paid for her silence. I paid for yours. My knees went weak. I had to pause the audio. He kept talking about the guilt, the fear, the way she'd started drinking, the things she'd say about me when she was angry. Then his voice cracked. I wanted to tell you when you were old enough, but I didn't want you to look at me and see a coward. For a long time, I just sat there staring at the blank TV screen after the audio stopped. Then I realized something horrifying. The call logs from his last week alive showed 2 calls with her. One the detective had mentioned. The second, only 12 minutes long, right before he collapsed. She talked to him before he died. And if what I was starting to believe was true, maybe his heart attack wasn't an accident either. She'd done it once, maybe she'd done it again, and now she was out there with nothing left to lose. The next time Detective Jameson called, his voice was tight. We found her, he said. She's in custody. They'd picked my mom up at a motel just outside Colorado Springs. She'd registered under a fake name, but she still used her birthday for the room key code. Same old arrogance. When I got to the station, she was sitting behind a glass partition, calm, clean, almost smug. Look who finally grew a backbone, she said when she saw me. I didn't respond. I just sat down, staring through the glass. You think you've got it all figured out, huh? She said, smiling faintly. That I was some monster who ruined your daddy's life. He thought you killed someone, I said. My voice came out steady, but inside I was shaking. She tilted her head like she was actually amused. You mean Marcus? She said his name so casually, like she was remembering an old coworker, not a missing man. He wasn't supposed to die, she said finally. He just wouldn't shut up. He thought he could blackmail me first. I froze. Your dad told him I was pregnant. Marcus came to the house one night, said he wanted compensation for keeping his mouth shut. He grabbed me, pushed me. Her smile faded, replaced by something colder. So I pushed back, harder. She leaned forward, eyes locked on mine. I didn't mean to kill him. But once he was gone, your father and I both knew the truth. We'd lose everything if it got out. So I made him a deal. He'd keep quiet, and I'd make sure nobody ever blamed him. And for a while, we were fine, until he started feeling guilty. I swallowed hard. So you bled him dry instead? I protected us, she snapped. You think he would have survived prison? You think I'd let my child grow up being called a killer's daughter? Then her tone shifted, softening into something that made my stomach turn. But he wasn't as innocent as you think, she said. He didn't just pay to protect me. He paid to keep you quiet too. I frowned. What do you mean? She smiled that awful, satisfied smile. He knew about your accident when you were 3. The one I told you was because you fell off the swing. She tapped her temple. You don't remember, but he did. He saw the bruises. He almost called CPS. I told him if he did, I'd tell them about Marcus. So he stayed quiet. He let me raise you however I wanted. And he paid to keep it that way. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. Everything blurred, the letters, the lies, the years of fear. She'd not only killed a man, she'd broken both of us just to maintain control. He was terrified of you, I whispered. She shrugged. Good, fear keeps people honest. When the detective stepped back into the room, she turned to him like nothing happened and said, You can't prove anything. All you've got are old letters and guesses. But I knew better. There was more. The USB drive had metadata, voice recordings, dates, details about Marcus Carr, the stains in the garage, the transfers that matched the days after his disappearance. Enough to ruin her forever. And she didn't even realize it. As they took her back to holding, she looked over her shoulder and said softly, You're just like me, you know. You used what you found to destroy someone. That's my blood in you. That line stuck to me like oil. Because maybe, in a small, awful way, she was right. But I also knew what came next wasn't destruction. It was justice, the kind she could never manipulate. The trial took months. Every week there was a new headline, local woman accused in decades-old murder cover-up. New evidence links missing employee to extortion case. Every time her name appeared, I felt the knot in my stomach loosen a little. She tried to play the victim at first, claimed my dad had controlled her, that she'd been forced into silence. But the recordings, the bank statements, and the DNA found in the old garage floor told the truth she never expected to face. The detectives even found fragments of Marcus's watch buried near the property she'd sold years ago. The jury didn't need long. Second-degree murder, fraud, blackmail, extortion, 37 years. When the verdict was read, she didn't even look at me, just smirked, like she'd been expecting me to feel sorry for her. I didn't. I just watched her be led away, finally small and powerless. I thought that would be the end, that justice would feel like closure. But the real revenge came later, quietly. Dr. Simons called to tell me that her dental license had been permanently revoked. The office sold her client list to cover the losses from her embezzlement. Her brothers, the uncles who called me a bargaining chip, tried to defend her publicly. But once the reporters got hold of the old family documents I'd leaked anonymously, their names were dragged right alongside hers. They'd known she was blackmailing my dad for years and said nothing. They lost their jobs, their reputation, everything. I didn't smile. I didn't celebrate. I just watched it all unfold, piece by piece, the way she'd watched my father fall apart. I sold her house, every piece of it, and donated half of the proceeds to a missing persons charity under Marcus Leary's name. The rest went into a trust fund for victims of domestic abuse. I figured that was the only way to make something good out of what she'd done. I visited my dad's grave after the sentencing. It was the first time I'd gone since I found the letters. I told him everything, about the USB, the trial, even about the way she looked at me when they took her away. I told him I wasn't angry at him anymore. Then I left the envelope of his last letter on his grave, the one that said, I wanted to tell you when you were old enough. I guess I finally was. Before I walked away, I looked up at the sky and said quietly, she was wrong about one thing, because I wasn't like her. I used what I found to tell the truth, not to destroy people for power. And maybe that's what real revenge is, letting the truth burn slow, until every lie finally turns to ash. As I got in my car and started the engine, I saw the prison bus passing by on the highway, her face in the window, blank, unreadable. For the first time, I didn't feel fear or anger or hate, just peace. And a small, steady thought that made me smile to myself before driving away. Guess she finally learned what it feels like to be the bargaining chip.